Family Time 175. We're talking about ethical constructs. This is a big part of responsible decision making, especially as you get older and you're making more decisions for yourself. You're not basing a good decision or a bad decision on someone else's opinion. You have to start to think for yourself, take those steps toward being self actualized. And we have to have a foundation of ethics. It goes back to our core values that we talk about at the very beginning of the year. Where do you stand? What do you believe in, really? That's what we're trying to establish. And ethics, that's a deep rabbit hole. We could look at a lot of different things. We're just going to scratch the surface, but I want you thinking about some fundamental elements of ethical decision making. You're going to have to make more and more decisions in your life based on ethics. You're already doing that. You absolutely are. You're already making a lot of decisions based on your conscience, based on whether you feel things are right or wrong, kind of that gut instinct. And that's going to continue to be the case. As you get older and you continue to face more complicated decisions in your life, you have to decide, okay, am I making the right decision? Well, that's pretty vague. It's hard to determine what's right. So we have to be able to fall back on our values, our belief systems, our core values, a system of ethics, of making decisions that don't have a clear-cut right or wrong answer. The basic things I want you thinking about, concepts I want you contemplating, we talk about ethics. First is the idea of equity and fairness. I really think it's built into all of us, a desire to have things be fair, that we seek fairness. It's why when we're little kids, maybe some of you have younger siblings or you're around some younger kids sometimes, and they get really upset when they think something isn't fair. It's like, well, that's not fair. Oftentimes, though, we confuse fair and equal. We say we want something to be fair, when really what we want is we want something to be equal. And it's good to want things to be equal sometimes, but we confuse the two. Fair means essentially, and again, you can find a lot of different definitions of this. I'm certainly no expert on it, but to me, the way I think about it is that if something is fair, the outcome sort of matches the input. And what I mean by that is if you work really hard, you give your best effort, you do things ethically, morally, you do things for the right reasons, you're going to find some success. You're going to find something of value, even if it's not what you were seeking. And in that way, it's fair. That's fair. You get out of things what you put into them. If you don't give a great effort, if you're making decisions for selfish reasons, you're probably not going to have a great outcome. And that's fair. There are a lot more things in life that are fair than we think they are. There's the old saying, well, life isn't fair. And maybe in some aspects, but really life isn't equal. We do not have equal opportunities. We aren't born with equal natural abilities. We aren't born with equal support from people around us. So we think, well, that's not fair. I don't know. But those things being sort of distributed randomly, that makes things kind of fair. Because it's just distributed. We don't have control over what we're born into, for instance. We don't have control over a lot of our circumstances. But everybody is in that same boat. Yeah, some people are going to have more things given to them. Some people are going to have just more opportunities immediately. That's not equal. But worrying about that, worrying about whether things are equal and thinking, well, that's not fair, that doesn't serve us very well. Believing in the things in life that are fair, like work, integrity, and those things being meaningful, that levels the playing field a lot. That makes things a lot more fair. And if we don't get caught up in feeling like, oh, geez, it's not fair, it's a lot easier for us to control our actions. Really the only thing we can control. So try not to get caught up in that stuff. If it's like, oh, so-and-so, this teacher, this coach, this parent, this whatever, favors another kid. That's not fair. Okay, take a step back though. I'm not saying it's not true. You can be unfairly treated too. And that's when things become unfair, if somebody's showing unjust favoritism, things like that. But think about it. And I think sometimes we fall into, well, this person got this thing and I didn't. That's not fair. Well, if that person did what they were supposed to do, did what was asked of them, gave a great effort, and we didn't, that's fair. That's totally fair. It's just not equal. So I want you to think about those things, the difference between fair and equal. Next, I want you to think of the idea of justice. That's really built into us too. That when we deem something is unfair, we want justice. We want there to be some consequence. We want there to be some leveling of the playing field. And I think that's great if we're approaching it in the right way. If we are trying to strike out injustice. If we're trying to eliminate those situations where someone is using power to oppress someone else. That is unjust. That is unfair. And if we can remove those barriers, we make things a lot more fair for everyone. So that's built into us. But we have to consider what is really just in any given situation. What consequence or reward matches the input. All of these are really, really difficult concepts. They're complex. I just want you to consider that idea too of what is justice, really? And how do you determine that? That's a difficult thing. Even when you have your own kids someday and you're trying to decide, okay, what behavior should I try to redirect? Where should I have consequences and boundaries? Where should I allow some freedom? Where should I allow some experimentation, allow them to face some challenges or some hardship on their own? Where do I draw those lines? And is what I'm doing in terms of a consequence or rewarding behavior, is that just? If a kid makes a mistake, one of my students, my athletes, if you do something that is deemed undesirable behavior, it is deemed a mistake in some way, well, what is the consequence? And does it match? Does the consequence really meet and address the behavior? Sometimes it doesn't. If you look at kind of older styles of parenting, perhaps, and I should say things that were typically, previous generation, like if a child has a negative behavior and then spanking that child or getting out the switch or something like that, does that punishment really match and correct the behavior we're trying to correct? Is that just? You can argue however you want, but those are things that we need to think about. Along with it, I want you to start really thinking of different schools of ethics, very basic terms. And I'm just going to throw kind of 3 out there. The idea of ends-based, rule-based, and care-based ethics. And these are umbrella terms for a lot of different ethical ideas and ethical constructs. Ends-based is essentially we're making decisions trying to do the most good and the least harm. That's really utilitarianism is the term for that. I always think of Spock from Star Trek, which is maybe a reference not a lot of people get anymore, but he was very logical. And his famous quote was, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one." That's utilitarianism. That's a great entry into ends-based thinking, is what is the outcome? What am I trying to get as a result? And if I'm trying to make ethical decisions based on an ends-based way of thinking, how do I do the most good and the least damage, the least harm? Then there's rule-based thinking. Rule-based thinking can be great too, but it's essentially you're making your ethical decisions based on a set of rules. And those could be preordained rules. Could be the rules established in a religion, if you're a religious person. Could be the rules of a government, of a society. It could be the rules of a school, of a business. And you're saying, okay, we are operating within these rules. These have been established. So if I'm behaving ethically, I'm playing by the rules. In sports, it's an easy example. There are established rules for what you can do. If you're breaking those rules, one could argue that's not very ethical. If you're trying to do everything that you do within the framework of the rules, like, okay, these are the rules, we need to operate within this, that's a type of rules-based thinking. There's an established order. The last one is maybe even a little more vague. It's the idea of care-based thinking, is you're trying to make your decisions based on a sense of care for a particular person or a particular group of people. And sometimes this can be in conflict with that ends-based thinking, where it's, oh no, I would maybe be willing to surrender some benefits for some other people in order to try to protect this person or to protect a group of people that I really care about. And that's not to make care-based sound selfish, but it's another way of thinking of like, oh, this is what I really care about. These are the people I really care about. And I'm trying to make my decisions based on that. Those are all things we're going to talk about this week. I know I kind of went on a little bit in this video discussion here, but start thinking about some of those things and start deciding, where do you fall and something, what do you believe for yourself ethically that's going to help you in any decisions you have to make in your life. Till next time, much love.